That was a light bulb moment. Because if you don't have the right color, you don't have the right frequency. If you don't have the right frequency, you don't have the right integrity. If you don't have the right integrity, you can't perform your function. And so everyone is mystified by all of these autoimmune conditions, right? There's over 100 of them now. Guess where they all start? Look, people have got to wake up. And they've got to stop defending their doctor. And people will defend their doctor to their death because they can't believe that their doctor doesn't understand this. And the whole thing is the meme that runs medicine. It's a very simple phrase. You are anemic, you are copper toxic. And that's the inversion of the truth, as you described. And people need to understand, oh my gosh, I'm a copper desert and I'm drowning in iron and I've got all these symptoms. And it's from all that oxidative stress, but no one's ever connected the dots that way. And we've got to stand up and say bullshit on the system because it is against us.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
Is your car alive again, or is it still dead?
Yeah, car's fine. Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt when things like that happen. I've had that kind of issue where, it's just suddenly your car's driving just fine and then it just plays dead. And you're like, what?
Right, exactly. We're good.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mr. Magnesium, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for coming on my show. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Magnesium, the third or fourth most abundant mineral in the body.
Well, magnesium is important, but copper is what rules the roost.
Really? Well,
yeah.
Can we talk about magnesium and why it's important, and then we can go to copper and why it's even more important? Because you're right, copper is not something you normally talk about. You know about sodium, you know about potassium, people know about calcium, but magnesium and copper, that isn't very talked about. People talk about zinc as well. People say, if you get infection or cold, take some zinc. So,
all narrative.
All right.
That's absolute narrative.
Well, tell me, just do the mother of downloads. Tell me, inform me and my audience, what are we missing?
No, here we are 5 years after COVID, and people still believe the system. It's absolutely amazing. And it was in April of 2020 when I started to think about the COVID cocktail, which was high dose ascorbic acid, high dose vitamin D, high dose zinc. That's the perfect triad to kill copper in the body. Most people don't know that because most people are afraid of copper, so they don't know what the agents are to reduce copper bioavailability. Well, I'm really good at that. And so I renamed COVID, what it stands for. COV stands for copper's vanished. ID stands for iron's dysregulated. The research you're likely not familiar with was done here in the States in 1928, 2 separate studies, March at the University of Wisconsin, May at the University of Kentucky, where they withheld copper from the animal's diet. They just wanted to see what's going to happen. What's the response going to be? So copper's down, and iron filled up their liver.
Mm.
And so that's why copper's vanished, iron's dysregulated. It's accumulating in the liver. Now, if you study the areas of longevity, they love to talk about aging, like it's some mysterious process. Do you know what aging is? It's just iron accumulation. So we're led to believe that the average woman needs 4,000 milligrams of iron in their body, and the average guy needs 5,000 milligrams. Well, get out your calculator, multiply your age times 365. And that'll tell you how much iron you really have in your body. So I'm 72. So I've got 26,000 milligrams of iron in my body, which is a multiple of 5 times what it should be. And it's not my formula. This is the formula that all iron biologists use around the planet.
But don't you lose iron though? People lose iron. That's why you get anemic. You don't keep all that iron inside you.
Anemia is a myth. So iron will show up low on a blood test, but it's high in the tissue. It's stuck in the tissue. And so there's a whole nother field of anemia called anemia of inflammation, anemia of chronic inflammation. And that's clinically caused by copper deficiency. So the meme that runs the planet is you're anemic and you're copper toxic. And that has been so embedded in our psyche for about 60 years now that everyone actually believes it. And the key issue is there was a time when oxygen was not on the planet. Do you know about the Great Oxygen Event?
No, tell me. I'm fascinated.
Okay.
Let me know.
So 3+ billion years ago, cyanobacteria, blue bacteria, blue is a very important color, especially when you're thinking about copper, but cyanobacteria began to play with this bright orb in the sky. Where they came from, I don't think anyone really knows, but cyanobacteria started to engage in photosynthesis. You've heard of it, right? It's really important. What's given off oxygen. The part that you might not know about is that there are 2 critical enzymes to allow photosynthesis to work. One is it's called plastocyanin, and what you've got in photosynthesis is photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. Well, actually, 2 works before 1, but 1 was discovered first. It's very confusing. But in the middle is this plastocyanin. So photosystem 2 grabs the photons, passes the electrons to plastocyanin, which is copper dependent, ding, ding, ding. And then those electrons go over to photosystem 1, and voila, we're able to complete the cycle. But there's another really critical enzyme involved in photosynthesis. It's called rubisco, like Nabisco, right? Well, rubisco stands for ribulose diphosphate carboxylase. And it's the most prevalent enzyme on planet Earth because it's what allows the plant to take the carbon and put it in the sugar. It's really important. It's a very important process because if you don't not making sugars in photosynthesis, you don't have an effective process. And so that is a copper dependent process. So everyone loves to talk about things like photosynthesis, but not understand that the reason why we're here on the planet, the reason why you and I are having this switched on conversation using very sophisticated technology is that higher life systems needed more energy to support more IQ. Well, you could only do that by oxidizing the fuel. You had to use oxygen and sugar or oxygen and fat in order to create more ATP. So when we're fermenting sugar, we make 2 ATP. That's called cancer. Yeah. When we're oxidizing glucose, rough numbers, we make 32 ATP. When we oxidize fat, we make 140 ATP. It's a very different process. And it's very much dependent on copper again. The beta oxidation enzymes require copper. The part that people don't understand or have not been trained about is that I can identify 18 different enzymes inside the mitochondria that require copper. But you've never heard that.
No, I mean, I knew about cytochrome C oxidase, and I knew that copper was a cofactor for that in the electron chain, transport chain. And that's what helped generates the ATP. And without it, basically the body struggles to make energy efficiently.
Absolutely.
I didn't know there was 18 of them. I didn't know there was 18 different.
No, there's no aspect of the mitochondria that doesn't require copper, but they don't tell you that.
No, they don't.
So why is complex 4 so important? Because that's where oxygen is turned into 2 molecules of water. And that releases 3 ADP that then go over to complex 5, which is also copper dependent. There's an alpha and beta subunit. Well, the beta subunit is where the extra phosphate is being added to magnesium ADP and turning it into magnesium ATP at a blistering pace, so that the complex 5 rotor is spinning at 500 revolutions per second. Now, on your best day, you could probably do 1 revolution per second, maybe 2 if you're really agile, but 500 revolutions per second? And there's no awareness about this in science. It's documented in the literature. And so there's a matrix, there's like a little swimming pool inside the mitochondria, right? And the really sophisticated research will talk about Cu-L, copper ligand. Now, the important research is coming out of Auburn University with Paul Cobine, very gifted copper researcher. And in 2004 and 2006, he documented that there's 50,000 atoms of copper in that little swimming pool in the center. Apparently, the Russians didn't get the memo that you weren't supposed to identify who the ligand is. But Puchkova, Dr. Puchkova in Moscow, revealed that the ligand attached to the copper is the master antioxidant in the body called Ceruloplasmin. And that's a very funny word. What is cerulo? Oh, it's sky blue. We're back to this blue thing again. Turns out that complex 4, sky blue. Ceruloplasmin, sky blue. Why is blue tissue so important? Why would Mother Nature design complex 4 to be sky blue? Because blue tissue attracts red light. Why is red light so important for the mitochondria? So it can block nitric oxide from stopping the whole conversion of oxygen into water. And there is a reason for all this, and there's a reason why red light therapy works. But why do people need red light therapy? Because they're copper deserts, and they don't know that. And they've been conditioned to think, oh, you need more zinc. Oh, you need more ascorbic acid. Oh, you need this and that. And they've never been told, certainly in their practitioner training, that it's copper that runs energy production, exhaust elimination, tissue integrity. You've heard of earless EDS. There's 6 different forms of it. Well, there's one enzyme that's critical. It's called lysyl oxidase. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. Well, lysyl oxidase is what knits collagen, which is strong, with elastin, which is flexible. And it knits them together like a zipper. And that's what gives tissue integrity. You probably have heard of melanin.
Yes.
It's really important. It's really important for hair color, skin color, and eye color, right? And if you think it stops there, I've got a used BMW right outside my office I'd love to sell you. Because what's really important is the color inside your body. The heart is supposed to be red. The liver is supposed to be brown. The gallbladder is supposed to be green. And the spleen is supposed to be the color of an eggplant, a royal purple. And when I was sharing this with the students in my class a couple of years ago, one of the members of the class, she was a surgeon. She said, Morley, I've never seen a purple spleen. That was a light bulb moment. Because if you don't have the right color, you don't have the right frequency. If you don't have the right frequency, you don't have the right integrity. If you don't have the right integrity, you can't perform your function. And so everyone is mystified by all of these autoimmune conditions, right? There's over 100 of them now. Guess where they all start? In the spleen. And if the spleen is backed up with iron, because it can't recycle the iron to make new red blood cells, the iron becomes this nuclear reactor for chaos. And it disrupts the ability to pick out the encapsulated bacteria. You can't pick up the parasites. And the whole immune system begins to break down inside the spleen. I mean, we're led, again, we're led to
Can I just quickly check something with you, like just that comment? But before you do answer that one, I just want to say, having been through med school,
yeah,
we didn't have any lectures on copper,
of course not.
and going through medicine, surgical training, we're the ones that we talked about. We talked about iron deficiency, we talked about sodium and potassium deficiency. We didn't really talk about magnesium at all. We would talk about calcium. But we definitely would not talk about things like copper. That's not. And I remember, if patients came with copper bracelets, my bosses would be like, "Oh, look, here's a woo-woo patient. Here they are with a copper bracelet. What's that going to do for them?" And that's my take-home message as a trainee doctor. And I just remember, why would anybody talk about copper? I think also the impression I got as a trainee doctor was that you don't get copper deficiency. That's not a thing. Like,
of course,
you get enough copper in your diet and everything. But listen, back to your thing about spleen being the cause of like all autoimmune conditions. I'll be honest with you, I get a little bit nervous when people pin things to one flagpole and say everything's because of this. It's everything's down to 5G, or everything's down to spike protein, or everything's down to the fact there's no viruses, or everything's down to this one point, and if we fix this one point, everything is fixed. It's quite a broad statement to say all autoimmune is down to the spleen.
Well, it is a broad statement. What it really comes down to is there's a three-ring circus that runs the planet.
Okay, so one more thing I was going to say, because there's also the gut is also a big thing. A lot of people are like, it's all about the gut. The gut's wrong, and this dysbiosis, it's all messed up. So what I'm trying to say is I get very nervous with absolutes. I'm getting, as I get older, I realize it's not always black and white. They're grays, and that oftentimes it's multifactorial. There are lots of different things coming together to create problems. Anyway, just putting it out there.
Let me share a story with you. You have what we call post offices here in the States. I don't know what you call it in England.
What's it called?
Post office?
Dude, we invented it. Of course I know what post office is.
Okay, all right. So you're suffering from what I call post office syndrome, mailbox syndrome. Okay? And every mailbox has a different combination or requires a different key, right? And those are all the different diseases we know about. There's in the Merck manual, there's 20,000 different conditions that are profiled, and they all are hiding behind a different mailbox, right? When I was in college, I worked in the mailroom in the university. I didn't need a key or a combination. I had access to everyone's mailbox. And that's copper and iron and oxygen in our body. That's the three-ring circus that runs the planet as far as I'm concerned. Copper and iron are the only two redox active metals on planet Earth. Everything else is static. And if you can't manage oxygen on this planet, you have a very serious problem. And what's the precursor to all conditions? Oxidative stress.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
And what causes oxidative stress is iron that's not being properly regulated. And there's only one element on the planet that can regulate both iron and oxygen at the same time and not cause static, and that's called copper. And you got through med school, got through your residency, and what have you, practicing, and you probably have a degree. I'm going to guess it's an MD degree. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you want to know what it stands for?
Mind control, derangement. I mean, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I affectionately refer to doctors as mineral denialists.
Not bad.
Because you weren't taught about the power of minerals in the body.
Dude, look, just between you and me, right? We weren't taught much.
No, I know. I understand. No, trust me, I've learned that. I used to blame doctors for the problems. And a very dear friend of mine, Ben Edwards, said, wait a minute, don't blame me. You can blame my professors. But
Yeah,
don't blame
100%.
me.
I mean, it's trauma-based mind control and indoctrination and bit of information, but not very much. Before you go on about this, I just want to explain to people who don't understand redox metals. It's just not everybody's like, no, but redox metals, what you mean by that is metals that readily participate in, oxidation reduction. So reactions, so where there's transfer of electrons, where they can lose oxidation or gain reduction in electrons. So they can lose electrons, which is oxidation, or they gain electrons, which is reduction. And that's kind of critical in the biological processes because that's where the energy, you got these transfer of energy. So like you said, it's only iron and copper that you can do this. And that's why you've got iron and hemoglobin. And that plays a critical role. And also electron transfer in mitochondria as well. Iron is required for that. And detoxification. And then now you're talking about copper, cytochrome C oxidase, superoxide dismutase, all these kind of enzymes. So this is what you're talking about. And some people say that you've got things like zinc, but it's not really a proper, true, classic redox metal, or manganese, or cobalt. I don't know about cobalt. What do you think of that?
No. Cobalt's very disruptive to copper.
Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that. So if people are listening, they're like, what the hell are these guys talking about? Anyway, carry on. Go back on to that.
Yeah, see, in the world of the root cause protocol, which I founded many years ago, we ignore the enemies. We don't worry about the pathogens, the heavy metals, the toxins. We're focused on we ignite the energy. That's what's missing on the planet. People have this devastating loss of energy production because of the food system. And one of the biggest changes that took place was during the Second World War, before our time. I was born in 52. I'm not sure when you were born.
75.
75, okay.
Vintage year.
Of course, right? But in 1941, in the US, UK, and Canada, they started adding iron filings to wheat flour. Not organic iron, literally iron shavings. Because they knew that everyone was anemic. Wink, wink. Get it? Because on a blood test, people didn't have enough copper to regulate the iron, and so the numbers looked low. The part that you weren't taught in medical school was how is blood made? How is bone made? How are babies made? How is energy made? And I've studied those very, very carefully, and they're all intimately dependent on copper. But that's not taught. We're taught that we need energy, like it comes from the sky. It doesn't. And the process of making, we've been chatting now for about 20 minutes. So every second of every day, every second, we have to replace 2.5 million red blood cells in our body. That's an enormous turnover. Just one red blood cell has 1 billion atoms of iron.
Wow.
Each red blood cell. And we're turning over 2.5 million per second.
Wow.
And no, it is. There is a wow factor to it. In the course of 24 hours, it's 200 billion red blood cells. So we got 200 billion times a billion. We got to manage all that iron. And what we've got to do is get that iron out of the recycling macrophages. Those are the Pac-Men. In the spleen, ding, ding, ding. Got to get that iron out of the spleen down to the bone marrow and our long bones at a blistering pace because we've got to make 2.5 million red blood cells a second.
Every second?
Every second.
2.5 billion?
2.5 million red blood cells. Yeah.
Every second?
Every second.
Wow. I didn't know it was that many.
And so here's what's really, really important. So we've got to turn over 200 billion red blood cells every day, and that requires 25 milligrams of iron. 25 milligrams of iron. And the amount of iron it's a big number. It's nanonillion. It's a really big number. But in any event, 24 of those 25 milligrams comes from a recycling system. The formal name is called reticuloendothelial system. It took me 2 years to figure out that meant recycling. And 1 milligram a day is supposed to come through our mouth. Now, what they've done is they've flipped the narrative. And they've got us all convinced that we need to be eating 20 to 25 milligrams of iron every day. And when you study the iron literature carefully, what you'll find is the body holds on to iron with a passion. And yeah, there's a loss of the squamous cells in the intestine, maybe 1 to 2 milligrams a day. But think about the amount of iron people are getting in an iron-fortified diet. Every day, they're getting anywhere from 20, I would say it's as high as 75 milligrams a day.
Right.
And so there's this enormous accumulation of iron in our tissue, and no one's talking about that. And no one's talking about the fact that iron is a foot soldier and copper is the general. And you don't have to be in the military to know that generals are more important than foot soldiers. And so we're supposed to have this so-called thousands of milligrams of iron. Do you know how much copper we have? We have 100 milligrams of copper. It fits on the head of a 1-inch stick pin. It's a very tiny amount of copper. And this notion of we add a milligram of iron every day around the planet, that's the work of Gutteridge and Hallowell, Douglas Kell, Jamie Collins. These are Robert Crichton. These are the iron biologists that dominate the academic research on the planet. That's their formula, 1 milligram a day. And the public doesn't know that. Their doctors don't know that. And if you're accumulating iron, aging your body every day with the diet, and you don't have copper in your diet, there's going to be a mismatch. And so what we're now faced with on the planet is modern farming chemicals. You probably have heard of Roundup.
Yeah. All
right?
these glyphosate, or whatever they're called.
Yeah, exactly. And glyphosate, Jeremy Knowles was the professor. He was in charge of chemistry at Harvard University. And in a 1987 publication, he talked exactly how glyphosate killed copper metabolism. Very stuffy article, but what he was trying to get people to realize is we have a problem on our hands. And so Don Huber is a world-renowned metal biologist at Purdue University, and he studied glyphosate very carefully. Glyphosate got its original patent as a industrial pipe cleaner, trying to chelate the metals out of the pipe to keep the fluid moving. Okay? And then someone happened to notice that the runoff out of these pipes was killing the vegetation on the ground.
I've heard this.
Yeah, right. So we got a second use for glyphosate. So it's pulling minerals out of the soil. And what Dr. Huber has done is put it on a logarithmic scale. So you know about earthquakes. An earthquake of 3, it's unsettling, but dishes rattle, but no one gets hurt. Earthquake of 12, no, nothing's left. So glyphosate pulls out calcium and magnesium at a 3. It's the kinetic speed with which it comes out of the soil. It pulls out iron and zinc at a 9. It pulls out copper at a 12. So what does that mean? It means that copper is coming out of the soil 1 billion times faster than calcium and magnesium, and 1,000 times faster than iron or zinc. And here's the problem we have, Mohammed. These big numbers go right over our head. I don't understand that, so therefore it can't be very important, right?
Yeah.
So when I was a younger man, maybe a little older than you are now, I could run an 8-minute mile. That was for me, that was really good. But at that same time, my son, who was in college, he ran a 4:02. And I called him up and I said, "Are you going to go for it?" He said, "No." He said, "I could train for 6 months and still not shave those 2 seconds off." I said, "Well, it's still impressive." But his old man wasn't that smart. So I went to the gym to see what it felt like to run a 4-minute mile. So I got on a treadmill. I almost killed myself. I realized I was holding on for dear life, and the machine was doing all the work. But that was just twice as fast. We can't really comprehend 1,000 times faster. The speed of sound, Mach 1, is 780 miles per hour, which is 10 times the speed limit on the highway. That's 10 times. That's Mach 1. And there's some planes out there that can go Mach 5, Mach 6. But we're still not even close to 1,000 times faster. And so we don't realize that when you couple the kinetic properties of glyphosate in the soil with high fructose corn syrup that blocks copper uptake in our gut, with 3rd and 4th generation antibiotics that are designed to chelate copper out of the bacteria, wink, wink. Oh, did you know that there's another name for mitochondria? They're called purple bacteria.
Really?
Yes. And so when you administer something like Cipro, you're sucking copper out of that patient's body. And that's why they get all sorts of connective tissue disorders.
Yeah, Achilles tendon ruptures and a whole lot of things.
Right. So the lysyl oxidase enzyme disappears because it needs copper to run. And so we have this convergence between agriculture, food processing, and pharmaceuticals. They're all vectoring in on copper. And this idea that we get enough copper in our diet, that's just narrative. It's absolute narrative, and we're getting drowned in iron, and then we can't manage the oxygen that we've got. And there's actually 3 forms of hypoxia, because hypoxia is very disruptive to the body. There's altitude hypoxia. We're hanging out with Sir Edmund Hillary up on Mount Everest, right? The air is very thin up there. We have a second form called pathogenic hypoxia. The immune system is using oxygen, turning it into bullets to kill the pathogens inside the neutrophils, principally. And then we have a third form that you might not have ever heard of. It's called functional hypoxia. What causes functional? The inability to turn oxygen into water inside the cell is from a lack of copper in the diet, because the copper can't get into the cell and into the mitochondria where it's so critically needed. And so there's a very close relationship, I would argue, between functional hypoxia, and anemia. Because anemia is technically low hemoglobin in the blood, right? We don't have enough waders carrying the oxygen, right?
Mm.
Have you ever wondered why the body would do that? Why would the body lower the amount of hemoglobin? Because it knows it can't activate the oxygen that's being carried. So it downregulates the whole process of making new blood because it knows that if you keep bringing in all this oxygen, it's going to turn into oxidative stress because it can't be turned into water to release the energy.
That makes sense.
The body's really smart. The body has this capacity to understand its environment, both the external environment and the internal environment.
So can I just double check with copper,
Sure.
just a recap, you really need it for energy production, efficient energy production to make
Absolutely.
ATP. ATP is basically life. It's the energy source of the body, ATP. And if you're not making ATP, you're not making it efficiently, you can't heal, you can't regenerate, the cells won't function, the heart won't beat, your brain won't think, the neurons won't fire. There's no life. You need ATP. It's the basic building block energy of life. And copper is essential for that. And then copper is really important for hemoglobin. And even if you have normal levels of iron, if you're copper deficient, what you're saying is you can be anemic as well. So you need high levels of copper to process and absorb and store the iron properly and metabolize it, and then to make the hemoglobin in the blood. Is that a good recap?
Yeah, but what you're talking about, you just talked about two functions.
Yeah, I know. I was going to come to the other ones.
Well, there's probably 30 to 50.
Well, let's go on.
Well, see, the thing is, most of this research is stored with the Ark of the Covenant in the Indiana Jones warehouse. You just have to know which box it's in, right?
There's a lot of boxes there.
There's a lot of boxes there, right? And so, like I didn't know about Rubisco. That was a study done by Earl Frieden.
How'd you spell it?
Rubisco.
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 Yeah.
And Earl Frieden was the dean of metal biology back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s at Florida State University. And it was an article he wrote in 1971 about the copper protein, Ceruloplasmin. Here's something that's really fascinating. In that same article, he indicated that so in a healthy body, we're supposed to have 30 units of ceruloplasmin. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the height. That's the level of ceruloplasmin. That's its height. So that's not its IQ. To get to understanding the functional capacity of an enzyme, you need to be able to measure its IQ, right? And so the ceruloplasmin protein has, I would argue, about 20 different enzyme functions. The one that you might have heard of in medical school is called ferrooxidase. It's turning ferrous iron into ferric, so +2 state to a +3 state. So it can be loaded onto transferrin, or it can be stored in ferritin. Really important function. To understand the capacity of ferrooxidase activity, you need to be able to measure IQ. Now, here in the States, I think it's probably true in the UK, but there are only a handful of countries in the world where you can find out the IQ of copper, especially the ferrooxidase enzyme. I think that's amazing that we're not allowed to know the IQ of the capacity of these copper enzymes. You mentioned superoxide dismutase. You mentioned cytochrome C oxidase. A physician who's really focused on health, energy production, resilience, capacity to metabolize would need to know the intelligence of these copper enzymes. And here in the States, they're all barred by the Food and Drug Administration. the FDA specifically prohibits the capacity to measure those. You can do it in a research study on 4-legged rats, but don't you dare try to do it on the 2-legged rats, because it would blow up the model. And the reason why this is so important is what Dr. Frieden talked about in 1971 is that if the ceruloplasmin protein is only able to do 10% of its capacity, its IQ capacity, you're going to still be able to have fully functioning turnover of the red blood cells. 10% function enables anemia, prevents anemia. And then he went on to say a 1% function still has capacity, but here's the kicker. When ceruloplasmin activity, when its IQ function goes down to 0, 7 days later, the animals present with anemia. So it takes 7 days for no copper function to create the illusion of anemia in the blood.
Wow.
I think that's a crime. I think it's the greatest crime against humanity, is to create this illusion that you've been trained with, and every physician and every doctor around the planet believes in anemia. And that the only solution, you're talking about me vectoring in on spleen, all doctors vector in on, oh, you're anemic, you need iron.
Mm.
That is the most toxic thinking on the planet. Absolutely the most regressive way to respond to this massive turnover that needs to take place every second. You just need more iron. You're not trying hard enough. It's like someone who's overweight. Well, you need to exercise more and eat less, without any regard to their capacity to make energy, to burn fat, right? And so the training of practitioners worldwide, my 8 grandchildren understand copper metabolism better than doctors on the planet.
I'm not surprised by that. Very quickly, just when I say, is this different from, say, for example, I was an orthopedic surgeon, so someone's had trauma, surgery, and bled out on the road after a road traffic collision.
That would be the only time you're anemic.
Exactly.
Right.
That's when I'm clarifying the difference. Post-trauma, hemorrhage, loss, that's different, and that's where I would say to people, rather than a transfusion, just take iron, and every week it will go up by 1, and you don't need to take it for too long. But when we're talking about chronic anemic states, disease states, actually, what we should be looking at is the copper levels and copper metabolism. And so it's very different. We're talking about acute and a chronic thing. We're talking about chronic anemia here. Okay. Can I just quickly just say something? I'm really fascinated by what you said about Rubisco, because I just want to quickly talk about that for 2 seconds, because that's something I've learned today from this podcast. I can't believe it's the most abundant protein on the planet, and I didn't know about its name. Like, everybody should know about Rubisco. Its critical role in photosynthesis makes life as we know it on Earth possible. It specifically converts carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, known as inorganic carbon, into organic forms of carbon found in the biomolecules of all organisms. I mean, we are carbon-based life forms. Everything, plants, animals, we are carbon-based. I mean, this Rubisco is pretty goddamn bloody important. And I can't believe I didn't know about it. I'm 49 years old and I've just found about it. It's essential for all life on Earth. It's incredible. So thanks for telling me about that.
Well, yeah, but I've been studying these minerals for 15 years intensely. 3 hours a day, 7 days a week for 15 years. And when did I find out about Rubisco? 3 weeks ago.
Oh, shit. I don't feel so bad now.
No, but the scale of it, again, most prevalent protein on the planet. Am I supposed to know? Right? And it's like, so then you think about the juxtaposition of glyphosate and Rubisco. We got a problem on our hands.
Yeah.
We got a serious problem on our hands.
Can I quickly just sidetrack for a second while it's in my head? Sure. I don't know if you've heard of this saying, because you guys don't have royalty over there, but over here we talk about blue-blooded people as the royal family and the aristocracy and noble families. And like you said, blue is from the copper. I know this because my kids and I love nature, and we love looking into nature, and we know octopi have blue blood, which is fascinating, and that's because it's a copper-based blood. And I think that's incredible because everything else is heme-based, and I mean, there are a few different ones, but like octopi are the main one, octopus. And then so they've got this blue blood. I'm just wondering, is the saying blue-blooded coming from the fact that these rich families are in on it and they know the importance of copper and they've got high copper levels in their diet and their bloodstream?
You won't find that in conventional research, but there's a lot of fringe research that's absolutely convinced that that's what's going on.
What's going on?
It's not that there's a different form of blood in the royals. And so it's not just octopus. It's any spider.
Yes, spider as well. No, I didn't mean that the royal family had different blood. I meant actually like maybe they've just got a lot of copper in their blood and they're not copper deficient.
Yeah. I think that would be a safe assumption. But the thing is, the enzyme that you may or may not know about. There's 8 steps to make heme in our body. 4 of the enzymes are taking place inside the mitochondria, and 4 are outside the mitochondria. Very sophisticated process, as you might imagine. But the last step is when there's a little crane, to drop the iron ball into the center of the heme molecule, into the protoporphyrin ring, as they call it.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the crane operator? It's copper. And the name of the enzyme is called ferrochelatase. Have you ever heard that name?
No.
The gene is called fetch, F-E-C-H. But ferrochelatase needs to accurately grab the iron, drop it into the heme. Again, think about this. 2.5 million red blood cells. Do you know how much heme is in one red blood cell? It's an enormous number. And so we're led to believe that the mitochondria are energy factories. They're the powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yeah.
And you believe that, right?
Yeah.
No, it's a smithy. It's turning over iron all day long. And it's one of the most important jobs. It's like, think of it as a car plant. Jaguar, Range Rover, whoever, Rolls-Royce, they make cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have their own independent energy source. That's what a mitochondria is. It's turning over iron, it's turning over calcium, it's turning over amino acids. It's a very sophisticated recycling and manufacturing system that just happens to make its own energy. It's critically dependent upon what? Oh yeah, we got to move those electrons efficiently through the electron transport chain. And what's the fastest way to do that? You got to have copper. And they love to tell you about the iron sulfur clusters. Oh, that's the backbone of the complexes, right? You can't make iron sulfur clusters without copper. There's a critical enzyme called glutaredoxin 5. Surely you remember that from medical school, right? No, see, you weren't taught about enzymes.
I wasn't taught jack shit. I wasn't taught jack shit. I was taught some stuff, but not that much.
No, the thing is, what I've learned over the years is that the people who tend to get into medical school, they're really smart, but they typically are firstborns. Because firstborns follow the rules, and they do well in school. They don't challenge the status quo. The latterborns are the disruptors. They're the ones who wait a minute. And
I'm second of 5.
Okay, very cool. And the older sibling is what? Boy or girl?
Girl.
Okay, so you're the firstborn.
Why am I the firstborn?
Because in a family where the oldest is a woman, the firstborn male is the firstborn.
Is it? Some people might say that's very sexist.
I know. It's not my theory. There's a famous book written called Born to Rebel by a famous professor of sociology at MIT. That's a fascinating study of the family dynamics based on birth order.
So can I tell you something? I was very conformist and wanted to go along, but at the same time, I had a real streak of rebel in me.
Yeah.
And I've never really fit in. Even during med school, I didn't really fit in. And through my surgical training years, I didn't fit in. As a consultant surgeon, I didn't fit in. In the NHS system, I didn't fit in. And I ended up leaving the NHS. And then in the private sector, I didn't fit in. And then during COVID, I didn't fit in. So I'm the one guy that bucked your theory. But yeah.
It's fine. I love it. I mean, I'd rather have you be a nonconformist. And the thing is, your head is full of useless information about human physiology because you don't know about copper, iron, nor oxygen. And that's the very essence of that's the backbone of our body. Is how do we handle copper, iron, and oxygen? And I vowed, one of these days I'll get pulled off, but I vowed I'm going to create a 3-day medical school. Day 1, learn how to measure minerals. Day 2, learn how to supplement minerals. Day 3, learn how to play golf.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's it.
I don't play golf.
No, I don't either. But
you know what my father-in-law says? He's a retired general surgeon. He goes, golf is for wankers.
Golf is for what?
Wankers.
I don't think I know that word. Wankers. What's a wanker?
Let's move on.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up. That's great. I love that. No, when I gave up golf was a day that I was playing with some colleagues from work. And it was after I teed off, or I was in the fairway, and I hit the ball for the second time, and it hit a tree, and the ball hit me.
Oh, shit.
I threw my club down on the ground. I said, gentlemen, bring my clubs home for me, and I walked off. So I know when to give up on a sport. But the thing is, the public needs to know this basic information. And I appreciate your wanting to have this conversation. And you wanted me to start with magnesium. Well, let me explain why magnesium, where it fits into this model. If you don't have enough copper, you're going to accumulate iron. If you have a lot of iron, you're going to create a lot of oxidative stress. And what kills magnesium in the body? Oxidative stress.
Yeah.
And it's a very fast process. And so the optics are on magnesium status. You're magnesium deficient. You need more magnesium. It's like, why am I so deficient in magnesium? That was the question I kept asking. Why do we have this deficiency? And it took me 5 years to get back to copper, to find that it was copper was the problem. And it's not taught anywhere. Most people who are, quote, experts on magnesium never talk about iron, never talk about copper. Because it's like there's this code. Oh, and one of my good friends knows a very high-profile biohacker here in the States. I won't mention him by name. But a number of years ago, they were having a conversation. And this biohacker said to Patrick, what are we going to do about the Morley problem? And Patrick just looked at him. Because I'm very disruptive. Not just to allopathic medicine, but to alternative medicine.
Oh, Morley, can I quickly just tell you something? I've realized that the alternative medicine scene is just as problematic and mired with conflicts of interest, agendas, and egos as the mainstream allopathic medicine.
Absolutely. No, it is. And so copper eviscerates both allopathic and alternative medicine.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
The phrase that I'm coming over your way in about a month. There's a couple groups of functional physicians that want to meet with me and hear what I have to say, which is, I'm very honored to be able to do that.
Well, hold on. You're coming to the UK?
Yeah, to London.
You need to come and visit me.
I would love it. That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Dude, what the hell?
I know.
Okay, after this podcast, we'll talk about that.
We'll
what the hell?
I know. One of the meetings is with, do you know Douglas Kell? He's up at the University of Liverpool. All right.
No.
So Douglas Kell has more degrees than a thermometer. He's my age, very affable guy. And I've only talked with him once, but that was about 5 years ago. It was actually pre-COVID. And I asked him a really important question. I said, Dr. Kell, what's the ideal ferritin for a human being? He looked in the camera and he said, 0. I said, what? He said, Morley, well, I want to make sure you understand this. Rising ferritin in a blood test is not a sign of iron vitality. It is a sign of organ pathophysiology. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I just said? I said, yes, sir. I've read all your... His signature article, Ahmed, is from 2009. And the title is Iron Behaving Badly. Now, if you want to make a statement in an article, you'll have about 100 footnotes.
Yeah.
If you want to be really obnoxious about it, you'll have maybe 200 footnotes. How many footnotes do you think is accompanying his 2009 Iron Behaving Badly?
Either very low or very high.
2,400 footnotes.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And what he's telling the clinical and scientific community is you're not just wrong about iron, you're dead wrong. And so we're going to get together, I think it's May 22nd, and he's going to talk about clotting, and I'm going to talk about the mitochondria. And he's obviously focusing on iron, and I'm going to focus on copper. And I think the people in the room, their brains are going to go bonkers. But the thing is, the iron biologists know what the problem is. The people that need this knowledge are the physicians. They need to understand that iron behaves badly in a body that has a lot of oxygen and not enough copper. And they know about oxidative stress. So when you have stress in your world, like when we were having trouble connecting, I was having some technical issues. So that was stress for me. What did that stress do? It created more oxidative stress in my body. As soon as you have an argument with your spouse, a bad meal, you got a deadline, I just was in a car accident, you're creating this massive explosion of oxidative stress in the body. Why? Because under stress, 2 hormones get released, adrenaline and cortisol. What does adrenaline do? Adrenaline is a supercharger for oxygen. It forces oxygen into the mitochondria along with the iron, right? What does cortisol do? Cortisol increases the production of metallothionein 4 to 5-fold. And what does metallothionein do? It binds up copper 1,000 times stronger than it binds up zinc. So you're effectively taking copper out of the equation. You can't make energy. Iron is building inside the mitochondria. And what do athletes live on? Adrenaline. And guess what all athletes have? Anemia. And guess what they don't know about? Copper. And so they take iron thinking that that's going to make them more effective in whatever performance domain they're in. And what they really need is copper.
So can I just go back to oxidative stress? Oxidative stress is when your body creates all these free radicals. Okay, right. And these free radicals can disrupt basically the normal proteins and cell structure. And, superoxide, hydroxyl radical, hydrogen peroxide. These things can latch onto things. And your body naturally has antioxidants in the body, like vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione, and that kind of neutralizes the free radical production. But adrenaline and cortisol, in my understanding, is they create more radicals. Am I right? Free radicals. And that's the oxidative stress. That is what leads to damage to the cells, to the DNA, the machinery at the cellular level.
Right. But the part that you may not know about is that there's a whole series of antioxidant enzymes, like superoxide dismutase.
Dismutase, yeah, and catalase.
Catalase,
yeah.
And glutathione peroxidase. You're familiar with GPX. Then we've got paraoxidase in the blood. What do they all have in common? They all require copper. All of the
didn't know that.
Yeah, all of the antioxidant enzymes require copper. So, you familiar with Bruce Lee?
Yeah, before I say that, yeah, but I just again want the audience to know, why is this oxidative stress important? Because oxidative stress is a killer. It's not a mental state of mind. It's a physical killer. The stress leads to inflammation. It leads to aging. It leads to immune disrepair. It's not good. It causes the chronic disease. So you do not want oxidative stress.
And what's behind all of the terms you just used? Inflammation, aging, oxidative stress. What people don't know is what's behind all that is iron accumulating in the tissue, accumulating in the mitochondria, accumulating in the cell. There's something called the labile iron pool, LIP. For years, I thought labile meant happy. It's okay. Do you know what labile really means? Highly reactive. Labile means it's very reactive. And we've got these iron pools in the cell, in the mitochondria, in the nucleus, and no one's thinking about who's mining that iron. And in every one of those pools, you got to have copper. Again, this idea that the antioxidants inside our tissue, people have heard of melatonin. Oh, it's a sleep aid. No, it's not. It's the master antioxidant inside the mitochondria. Glutathione, master antioxidant inside the cell. Ceruloplasmin, the word that no one's ever heard and they don't know how to pronounce, but it's the master antioxidant inside our body. Here's an interesting factoid. You know about endothelial cells. They line all the vasculature.
Yeah.
Right? There's 1 trillion of them. Again, big number. I don't know that number, so it can't be important. It's really important.
By the way, just side note, I think this element that you keep going on about, the small number, big numbers, I'll give an example. When the news breaks, it goes, 5 people died in a car crash, and it's do, and you're like, oh my God, 5 people died, or 3 people were stabbed at a school, or whatever, and it's like, and you feel, oh my God, it's terrible. And then they go, 50,000 people died in Gaza, and it's like, oh well, so what? It just, the number once it gets to a certain number, double digits and more, your brain just goes, oh yeah, whatever, like, oh well, people died, who cares? 1 million people died in Iraq from the Gulf War, oh well, who cares? Like 1 million people. But
I know, you can't process it.
You just can't process it.
A friend of mine says, Morley, there's 3 numbers: 1, 2, and a lot.
Yes. What I mean.
So the thing is, we have 1 trillion endothelial cells. This is going to be big numbers on big numbers.
A lot.
Okay?
Basically a lot.
A lot.
A lot.
We have 1 trillion. That's 12 zeros, folks. Every one of those endothelial cells have receptors for ceruloplasmin. You didn't learn that in school. Here's the question. How many receptors do you think each endothelial cell has for grabbing ceruloplasmin? It's supposed to be in the blood.
A lot.
A lot, right? Yeah. 470,000 receptors per cell.
Okay,
Think
well,
about
I think that qualifies as a lot then.
that's a lot, right? But think about that. Think about if you had known that in medical school, you'd have raised your hand and said, "Oh, what is this thing about oxidative stress? And what does ceruloplasmin do? Oh, it releases enzymes so that there is no oxidative stress."
Yeah.
And now, what's the number one nutrient deficiency on the planet? Oh, yeah, it's anemia, according to the World Health Organization, which has no standing as far as I'm concerned, given what happened in 2020. But the point is, what that means is that if it's the most prevalent nutrient condition on the planet, that means there's zero ceruloplasmin function. That's what it really means. And let me flip it around for you. What's the number one element on planet Earth? It's iron. 36% of the Earth's composition is iron. Number one element. And prior to COVID, I would have argued that humans were the most evolved species. Now I'm not so sure. But the point is, we are the most evolved species. So to believe in anemia, what it means is the most evolved species on the planet has lost the ability to metabolize the number one element on the planet. It makes no sense. It doesn't jive. And so what I'm trying to do is bust this narrative wide open around anemia, because that's the chink that will bring the whole system down. And it really will. Because what is causing all the problems? People using iron-fortified food, iron supplements, iron infusions. Who are getting the most infusions? Young women who are pregnant and old people. It's out of control, completely out of control. And it's toxic to the core. Because where does all that iron go? It goes straight to the liver and the spleen. It doesn't go into the recycling system. It doesn't go into the reticuloendothelial system. It gets stored in the liver and spleen. They lose their color, ding, ding, ding. They lose their function, ding, ding, ding. They lose the capacity to make energy. And then we have this plethora of conditions like Hashimoto's or Renault's syndrome or vitiligo. And we're taught that, these are the latest conditions. And they're all caused by iron-induced oxidative stress. 100% of them.
I saw a video once with this chap. He got some cereal, mushed it all up,
Sure. Yeah.
and then dehydrated it, and then basically got a magnet, and there's bloody iron shavings in it. I was like, what the hell? So can I just double check the iron that's fortified in the cereal, for example?
Right.
That's not really the bioavailable proper iron either, is it? Or is it?
No. Well, actually, they've gotten really sophisticated now. There's 9 different forms of iron being added to the food system. This is profiled in a book by iron toxicologist named Jim Moon. The book was written in 2008. And the title is Iron, the Most Toxic Metal. And there's a whole chapter on iron fortification. And there's 9 different forms being added to the food system. How many of those 9 forms of iron cause cancer?
8?
9.
Oh,
all of them.
Wow.
And the part that they don't talk about is, at least in breast cancer, I've only been able to find this once in one study. There's 5 times more iron in a breast cancer cell than the healthy cell next to it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating is no one talks about vitamin A or retinol. It was in 1925. A 1909 graduate from Johns Hopkins Medical School. His name was Montrose T. Burroughs. He wrote an article in 1925 how retinol deficiency caused cancer. He wrote 4 articles in 1926. Retinol deficiency causes cancer. The 1926 Nobel laureate, Johannes Fibinger, wrote an article in 1927. He had gotten the Nobel Prize because he said that cancer was caused by a parasite. And he rescinded his research and said, actually, it's vitamin A deficiency. And he mysteriously died within months of that article coming out. And so you want to get really provocative?
The same vitamin A that's essential to treat measles.
Exactly.
Not the measles goddamn MMR vaccine, just vitamin A.
Right. And so where do you find vitamin A in the diet now? What's the richest source? Well, it's hard because you got to have grass-fed butter, grass-fed cream, heavy cream, grass-fed liver, right? Cod liver oil would be and yard eggs. Chickens allowed to eat their natural food of bugs and grass. They live to eat grass, but what are they fed? Organic soy and corn.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not their native, and so there's no retinol in there. And so retinol has become MIA on the planet. And here's why it's so important. There's 2 critical enzymes. You might have heard of these in school. ATP7A, the Menkes gene, and ATP7B, the Wilson's gene. They are copper-loading enzymes. They're pumps. But the key to start those enzymes is retinol. It's actually a retinoic acid, 13-cis-retinoic acid, is the key to turn on those copper-loading pumps. And ATP7B loads ceruloplasmin, principally in the liver, but it's actually made all over the body. And ATP7A makes all the others. There are scores of copper enzymes that nobody knows about, like Rubisco. And so, out of sight, out of mind. That's really what runs medicine. Out of sight, out of mind. I do what I've been taught. I'll give you medication. It's not going to help you, but that's what I'm supposed to do.
A pill for every ill. Never a cure.
Never a cure. Now, how do you spell cure? It's CU-RE. And why do I put the hyphen in? So you can see the symbol for copper, which is why my book is called Cure Your Fatigue. Because cellular energy deficiency is the precursor to every condition on the planet. But if you have copper in your diet, copper in your tissue, copper in your mitochondria, you make energy and you don't have any problems.
Right. Morley, very quick recap, again, just to keep my listeners on board. We know that copper is necessary for energy production. We know that it's required for iron metabolism and red blood cell formation. We know it's important in terms of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. It's a cofactor. Copper is a cofactor for superoxide dismutase, and that protects the cells from oxidative damage, helps neutralize free radicals, and reduce, inflammation and cellular damage. I mean, there's more stuff we could talk about. We could talk about brain health and nervous tissue health. We could talk about the immune system support. We could talk about connective tissue and collagen formation, which is really important. That was my job.
All the colors in the body. Color.
Cardiovascular health, bone health. The color business is important, like hair, eye color, whatever. But very, very quickly before we start even talking about any of that, I mean, and we don't have that much longer, about half an hour. I just want to ask you a quick question: why are you called Mr. Magnesium and not Mr. Copper?
I know, right? It's the name that stuck. I got started on magnesium, and the name stuck.
Okay,
it's hard to change your name.
Can I call you Mr. Copper? I'm going to do in the podcast, my title will be Mr. Copper.
That's right. I'll send you an AI generated picture of me. It's actually pretty funny.
Send it.
Yeah, well, it's me as a copper general. It's pretty funny. No, the thing is, have you read the book 1984?
Yes.
Okay.
About 20 years ago. It was not good.
It was published in 1948. So when you subtract 1948 from 1984, you get 36. Okay? When you add 36 to 1984, what do you get?
I don't know.
2020. So the book is about creating the totalitarian state. The book is about what is white is black, what is black is white. It's when citizens become enemies of the state. That's what that book is all about.
Yeah.
What started in 2020? The totalitarian state. And what people are fighting right now is, we know the banking system is jacked. The judicial system is jacked. The political system is jacked. The food system is jacked. Religion is crazy. And we're defending and holding on to, oh no, but my doctor, he couldn't be jacked.
All right, hold on a sec. Hold up. Dude, right, listen, I just want people to understand something, right? Right. Look, most of my listeners know me because I'm a cancelled surgeon, a COVID dissident. I didn't believe in the pandemic and the lockdowns and the social distancing and the masks are bullshit. I did not like the way medical ethics and informed consent went out the window. Right. And, you know, I created the podcast when I was working as an orthopedic surgeon because I needed to speak up because I was going crazy. I was going crazy with all the bullshit that was coming across on the airways. And yes, I talk about COVID quite a lot, but I'll be honest with you, Morley, right? I had a plan. Everything was planned. I was not going to do a podcast that just talked about COVID because even I get fucking tired of COVID.
Oh, I'm with you. 100%.
And what COVID taught me was that there are many things wrong in this world and it's multifactorial. And I've written a speech and I've done a podcast called The Age of Inversions talking about the black is white, white is black and everything. And it's all education, health, everything, politics, everything is back to front. But I also want to talk about all the other problems that we see out there. And that's why, you know, I try and get different topics and different guests. And when I reached out to you, I just was fascinated by your take on things and, you know, your root cause. I really love that. And the magnesium. And I knew the importance of magnesium for energy and how it can deplete. And I wanted to get you on and talk about, I didn't know about your other views. And when you just did that little mini rant talking about everything, I just want to say my love and respect for you has just gone up like exponential because it just tells me you know.
I do it, and I appreciate that. It's very, very high praise from you, and I appreciate that very much. People have got to wake up, and they've got to stop defending their doctor. And people will defend their doctor to their death because they can't believe that their doctor doesn't understand this. And the whole thing is the meme that runs medicine. It's a very simple phrase. You are anemic, you are copper toxic. And that's the inversion of the truth, as you described. And people need to understand, oh my gosh, I'm a copper desert and I'm drowning in iron and I've got all these symptoms. And it's from all that oxidative stress, but no one's ever connected the dots that way. And we've got to stand up and say bullshit on the system because it is against us.
100%. Just before you came, I had a friend come round and basically my friend had all the shots and everything. And ever since they've had all the shots, they've become quite unwell and they've had problems. And I said, what, you know, what's going on? They went, well, the doctors don't know. And they think it's an autoimmune condition. They think I've got a vasculitis, blah, 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 blah. And I went, come round. I'm going to have a chat with you. I'm going to have a look at you. And I saw them and they were showing me their blood results and their vitamin B12 is in the boots. And they have got some problems with, you know, low hemoglobin and whatnot, but it's just borderline. It's not much. But the main one is vitamin B12. And the symptoms are nothing like vasculitis. The symptoms are like peripheral neuropathy.
Right.
Tingling, pins and needles, tiredness, weakness in the hands and feet. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, and the doctor's giving me this diagnosis. And it's a bullshit diagnosis, mate. And,
Right.
and the diagnosis gives them a five month life expectancy. It's some granulomatous autoimmune, something weird condition. And and this person goes, and what's really confusing is I've that was 7 months ago. So I tell them, well, shouldn't I be dead by now? And they go, oh, well, you're an aberrant. I went, have they done any proper tests and examinations? I went, no. On what basis have they told you that you've got this diagnosis? Well, I told them I get pins and needles in my hands and it can get swollen and, cold. And they went, yeah, that's the basis on which this diagnosis has been made. And then I was like, that's bullshit. They've literally just pulled this diagnosis out of their backside.
Right.
Maybe you need nerve conduction studies. Maybe you need vitamin B12. Maybe we need to look at maybe you need copper. Maybe you need copper.
Let me connect the dots.
Maybe they need to examine you and listen to you, and maybe you need copper. Like now I'll be telling them to take copper, and just don't listen to them. But they want to hold on to this doctor, and then they complain that the doctor doesn't listen to them, doesn't look at their past tests. They ordered a test that they'd already ordered, and then my friend was like, "But you ordered that last time," and they went, "Oh, did I?" So they don't listen to my friend. They don't give a damn, but they've thrown out a diagnosis, and my friend wants to hold on to that diagnosis, and I'm like, you do know these people don't give a shit about you. You do know these people are just plucking a diagnosis out of their backside. You need to stop listening to these people. These are the people who poisoned you in the first place, made you sick, will give you some bullshit drug that doesn't work, like a steroid, and you're not going to be any better off. So I think I got through to them at the end. But I'm just showing you that people are really beholden to this system that is not in their best interest.
It's the Stockholm syndrome. People will protect their captors. And there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. Tremendous cognitive dissonance, because it's like, so as people listen to me talk and they say, so if it's this important, surely my doctor would know this.
Yeah.
And if it's this simple, surely I would know this, because I'm a real research hound on the internet. And this is not a one and done research. And so the thing is that the public needs to understand that they're stuck in Stockholm syndrome, and they're defending their captors. And what are the talons that doctors use to grab hold of these people? You're vitamin D deficient. You're anemic. You don't have enough calcium in your body. And those three, calcium, vitamin D, and iron, are the fastest way to de-energize the human being.
Okay. Can I quickly ask you something? Like, I don't want to leave people waiting. I think we've already had them waiting quite long. What's the best way of getting copper in your body? Like, I know there's foods like organ meats, like liver, which are very high and rich in copper.
Right.
I mean, what other ways? I mean, people talk about leafy greens. I mean, not everyone is a meat eater. Some people are, so I think liver and organ meats are great. I am a meat eater. I love meat.
Right.
But you can get shellfish. You can get greens and nuts and seeds and dark chocolate, avocado and stuff like that. I mean, is that enough, or do you recommend like supplementing copper through like do bracelets work? I mean, I'm asking a lot of things here, so I'll hand it back to you now.
Historically, those were the foods we would eat to get our copper. In 1930, our ancestors would get between 4 and 6 milligrams of copper a day in their diet. By 1960, it dropped down to between 2 and 5 milligrams a day. Now, 60 years later, here in the States, 80% of people do not get 1 milligram of copper a day. But yet we're supposed to get enough, right? So here's where it gets complicated. You want to know where to get copper in your diet. I do too. And what people do is they run to the nutrient tables to see copper, and they go down all the foods that you just listed. Do you know when the nutrient tables were last updated?
No.
1950s.
Oh.
Do you think the mineral composition has changed in the soil?
Yeah.
Right? And so here's where it gets really complicated. In 1987, Monsanto wanted to introduce glyphosate, Roundup, into Europe. And many of the countries were not really interested in that. But one country in particular, France, said, not just no, it's against the law. You will not be allowed to introduce glyphosate into our fields. So Monsanto said, sure, okay. 35 years later, a team decided to do a study to see how did the French citizens benefit from that decision. So in 2022, they did a study across the country. And what they learned is that 99% of French citizens, you're sitting down, right? 99% of French citizens are peeing glyphosate into their urine.
What?
Yep. Glyphosate is everywhere. It's in the air. It's in the water. Even if it's not in the farming system of France, 99% of French citizens are peeing it. So to answer your question, yes, eat those historic meats and nuts and seeds and legumes and things like that. But you got to supplement. You absolutely must supplement. And so 2020, I renamed COVID. 2021, I came out with my book, Cure Your Fatigue. And then I got really pissed off. And I inspired a supplement called Recuperate. That's my unending wit. Recuperate. And it's based on desiccated beef liver, turmeric, and spirulina. And you can have it with or without boron. And it's got 2 milligrams of copper. And people are bouncing back. Your friend, who has this very mysterious post-jab condition, he's a copper desert. And I was many years ago, I was talking with a world.
Sorry, very quickly, I have no problem in people making money and especially if it's a good product. I don't normally like product placements, but I'm just saying it's good.
I'm not pushing it. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. But in terms of dosage, what type of copper dose should people be taking? Like how much copper should they be supplementing?
I think people need at least 6 milligrams a day. They might need as much as 10 milligrams a day.
And when sometimes you see copper with like zinc and etc., should they have that or not? Just stick to copper.
No, just stick to copper. Get zinc in your diet. Get zinc in your diet. Do not. Zinc in a bottle is poison.
Okay. Can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
I do want my guests to do well and to promote their books and stuff. So for those of my listeners who would like to know, can you do me a favor? Yeah. Afterwards, email me every link that you want, links to your supplements, your books, and everything. And everyone listening, if you want to know what Morley's talking about and the supplements that he does in this book, it will all be in the show notes. Go to my show notes, go to my Substack, and everything will be there. Is that all right, Morley?
No, I appreciate that. I view myself as an educator, and I turn to like the book and this product and things like that to fund the company that runs the institute and runs the research and all that. So it's a self-propagating.
Yeah. What happens like certain things like magnesium and copper, they come in different formulations like citrate and glycinate. Is there a form of copper supplement? Say someone just wants to buy some supplement tablets. I mean, they come in copper gluconate, copper citrate, copper bisglycinate. I mean, is there any one that you would recommend over the other, or do you think they're all pretty much the same? You'll get the copper in there.
They're not all the same. I think the copper bisglycinate is probably the most bioavailable. People say, oh, that's copper too. Actually, the folks at Albion designed it so that it's actually copper zero, which means it's immediately admitted into the cell.
Yeah.
But what people need to understand is there's a method to the madness of the root cause protocol. We have a series of stops, about 12 of them. We have a series of starts. There's about 12 of them, and they're in phases. And you can't just pop copper and expect to turn everything around, because you got to have retinol in your diet. You got to have magnesium in your diet. You got to have B vitamins in your diet in order to have it all be synergistic. And so there really is intent behind the design of the root cause protocol. And so there are a lot of people who want to do a one and done. Oh, I got that thorn copper bisglycinate, and then they'll call me up and say, well, I don't feel well. I say, well, do you have the cofactors? And so that's where we get into a catch. But the point is, back to your friend, real quick. I'm talking to a world-renowned copper. He's a cardiologist. His name is Leslie Clavet. He'll be 91 next month. He's identified 80 anatomical, chemical, and physiological defects in a copper-deficient heart. You can't get cardiomyopathy if you have copper in your heart. Ding, ding, ding. Do you know what I'm referring to? Athletes dropping on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, in our very first conversation, he said, Morley, he said, I want you to understand something very important. I said, sure, what? He said, if any of your clients present with any form of neuropathy or neuralgia, he said it's a clinical sign of copper deficiency. So your friend who's got all these symptoms, and they're calling it itis. So any word that ends in itis stands for it's the iron seeker, and the iron is dysregulated because there's not enough copper to regulate it. Any word that ends in osis stands for oxidative stress is severe. Like, well, I don't know, atherosclerosis or fibrosis or osteoporosis. A lot of people worried about their bones. Guess what tissue in the body has the most magnetic attraction to iron?
Don't know.
Bone marrow. The bone marrow of our long bones. Why? Because they got to make 2.5 million red blood cells a second.
Makes sense.
And they got to pull in this iron as fast as they can. But guess where 50%, it's actually 47% of the copper in the human body is stored and used?
Bone?
Bone marrow. It's not just bone, it's bone marrow.
Bone marrow, yeah.
Because that copper needs to regulate that iron. And if there's no copper there, the iron activates acid phosphatase, another really important enzyme. What does acid phosphatase do? It eats away at the bone matrix to cause osteoporosis. And what reverses that? Magnesium, because it activates alkaline phosphatase. But then you also have to have copper to run ascorbate oxidase, which you've never heard of. You got to have it to run lysyl oxidase. You got to have it to run ATP. To make bone, you got to have energy, right?
Yeah.
And what do people know? Oh, I need more calcium and vitamin D for my osteoporosis. It will never solve the problem. Never solve the problem. Unless you get to magnesium and the copper side and get rid of the iron.
Tell me one thing then. What about the bracelets, these copper bracelets? Do they work? Because I know skin absorb things. I know you can absorb through the skin. It's an amazing organ. Can these copper bracelets work?
They're going to work on the margin. We're in an era now where people have copper socks and copper braces and copper bracelets and things like that, right? Copper, you can wear a copper cap. Guess where you need the copper? Inside your body. It needs to be in your diet. It needs to be in your cells.
But the skin absorbs it anyway. Whatever you put on your skin, your body will absorb it. It will eventually get inside.
You're not going to get enough. Trust me.
Right. Okay.
You're not going to get enough. And I'm afraid, Ahmed, that the window is closing on humanity, to be really blunt. People don't realize how fragile we are right now.
Dude, you know what?
Your friend,
I know this. I know this. I'm sorry for interrupting. I was just going to say, I watched a movie in the last couple of nights with my wife. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Idiocracy. Oh,
no, I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
Dude, you need to see it. You need to see it. It's insane. It's insane. It was made in 2016, and it talks about how humanity is just walking backwards. We're just getting dumber and dumber, and
That's
we're
exactly
destroying the planet. We're destroying ourselves, and we're marching towards extinction. You know,
and we're defending our captors.
yeah.
So people don't realize that we are in electronic concentration camps, right?
Amen. Right. Listen, I want you back. Listen, when you come to London, dude, you're coming to my house. You're coming to my studio in person, right? I'll take you out for a nice meal. It's happening. Listen, it's happening. We've got so much more to talk about, because we've got to talk about how copper, metabolism affects the brain health, the bone health, all those other things we talked about. We still talked about magnesium. We've got to talk about the best form of ways of supplementation. I mean, I don't know. I would love to have you back. Can you promise you'll come back?
I would be delighted to come back. It usually takes 3 or 4 bites at this apple for people to really understand what we're talking about. What I would like to do is send you I'm going to get you a location where you can do what we call the Full Monty Iron Panel. That's what we call it here in the States. And there's about 13 different blood markers. I'd like you to take the test, and then we're going to analyze the results online.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And let your listeners learn what this is all about. Because you're in great shape. You're what you said, 50, 49, 50?
I'm going to be 50 in July. Yeah, I'm going to be 50 in July.
No, you're in great shape. See, I have more energy now than I had when I was your age.
Right.
And I mean, again, it's simple changes in your diet, simple changes in your supplement routine, and you come to life. The switch goes back on.
By the way, it's just a camera that makes me look good.
Yeah, right. Okay. I don't believe that, but the thing is, your listeners need to know that there's simple testing that can be done that the national health system will resist violently. It's going to be out of pocket because they don't want you to know how to run and regulate your body.
Dude, that's it. Let's do it, man. I'm sold. Yes. I love that idea. Right, listen, I need to wrap up. Final question of the day. But don't close the browser until because we're gonna organize when we're gonna meet together face to face. I am so excited about that. It's gonna be amazing. Right, listen, Morley, this is my signature question that I ask everybody. You're on your deathbed. Don't know when it's gonna be, but you're gonna meet your maker. But before you meet your maker, you're surrounded by your loved ones. Before you pass away, what words of advice and wisdom are you going to impart to your loved ones?
Against all odds, pursue the truth. That's what this whole mission has been for the last 15 years. I had a client who had Lyme disease. He was in his 30s. He couldn't work. And he healed himself with the root cause protocol. But we were talking, and he said, "When were you born?" I said, "Well, no one's ever asked me that." But I said, "It was November 15th. He said, "I knew it." I said, what did you know?" He said, "Well, I couldn't work, so I taught myself astrology." He said, "Morley, only a Scorpio would dig the way you have." He said, "But only a true Scorpio would take on the entire medical establishment and not stand down." And I won't. I'm like, do you know the story of William Harvey and circulation?
No.
I think it was 1560s. He's the guy who figured out that the veins and the arteries are connected at the capillary, and that there's this continuous loop. It's called circulation. Well, he was ostracized by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. You can imagine that. That's preposterous. Look it up. Look up William Harvey and what he went through to try to bring the truth forward in medicine.
Wow.
And what I'm trying to do is bring forward iron recycling. Bring forward the truth of how our body recycles iron all day long. And you can't do it without copper. And nobody knows that. It's the greatest gap. There's 2 great gaps in medical education. So this is absolutely fascinating. Nobody knows about iron recycling. The greatest gap in medical education is no one knows how oxygen gets into the mitochondria. And you're thinking, well, of course they do. We know it. And I asked my younger son, Tom, who has a PhD from Stanford in biochemistry. I said, Tom, I'm just curious, how does oxygen get into the mitochondria? He said, oh, it's passive diffusion, Dad. I said, bullshit. He said, yeah, you're right. I just wanted to see what you knew. No one knows, Ahmed, how oxygen gets into the mitochondria. It's the second most reactive element after fluorine gas. And nobody, the closest we've gotten is Wittenberg, 2007. And they gave up and they said, we don't know how it happens. If you're trying to make energy, you got to know how the oxygen is moving through the cell into the mitochondria so it can be turned into water. And nobody knows, Ahmed.
No one knows.
No one knows.
Because isn't it what they say is it's in the bound to the hemoglobin. You get it from the lungs, goes to the hemoglobin, and then there's this passive diffusion across the concentration gradient or something like that.
That is absolute falsehood.
Ah.
Absolute falsehood. So we can't live on this planet without oxygen.
So do you know?
I don't.
No one knows.
Nobody knows.
What the fuck? That's crazy.
And we can't die on the planet without oxygen. If we don't manage oxygen, that's the mystery of the planet. We're dependent on oxygen, but if we don't manage it right, we're going to die because of the oxygen.
Right, this is a great place to end. Listen, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. We need to get Morley back. He needs to come and visit me in my studio and see my lovely chickens. So my chickens eat the bugs and eat the grass, and we get amazing eggs. We get the proper eggs.
After dinner, I just want a nice breakfast. That'd be great.
Oh, dude, I can definitely give you top-notch breakfast. So I'm also blessed where I live. It's just outside London, just outside Heathrow Airport, about 25 minutes outside of London in the countryside. And I have a local regenerative farmer. Everything's pasture raised. The lamb sausages and our eggs, man, that'll be a nice breakfast.
Maybe you can, if we're offline, we'll figure out, maybe there's, of a place, B&B, that can accommodate 4 people. Because I'm coming over with my wife and 2 friends for these meetings.
Yeah, let us wrap up and I'll quickly tell you. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks. I, Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.